The steam engine's whistle pierced the darkening South Dakota sky as Catherine Olsen stood alone on the wooden platform of Yankton's train station. Her traveling bag clutched tightly in both hands while the last departing passengers disappeared into the twilight of 1876. She had missed her connection by mere minutes, watching helplessly as the eastbound locomotive pulled away with her ticket still warm in her pocket. And now the station master had locked up and gone home, leaving her stranded in a town where she knew absolutely no one. The April wind carried the scent of the Missouri River and something else, something wild and untamed that made her heart race with equal parts fear and strange excitement. She was 23 years old and had never been this far west before, had never stood alone in the fading light of a frontier town with nowhere to go and no plan, except the desperate hope that another train would arrive in the morning. The platform stretched empty in both directions, weathered wood creaking beneath her feet as she paced, trying to decide whether to knock on doors seeking a boarding house or simply wait here through the cold night. Her navy traveling dress offered little protection against the dropping temperature, and she wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders. That was when she heard the sound of boots on the platform behind her, steady and purposeful, and she turned to see a tall figure emerging from the shadows near the hitching post. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that obscured his face until he stepped closer, and then she could make out strong features bronzed by sun and weather, dark eyes that studied her with curiosity rather than threat. He looked to be in his late 20s, with a lean build and the confident bearing of someone completely at home in this harsh landscape. A gun belt sat low on his hips, and dust covered his clothes as though he had ridden hard to get here. "Were you waiting for me?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of amusement mixed with genuine question, and Catherine felt something shift in her chest at the sound of it. "I beg your pardon," she replied, trying to maintain her composure despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "I do not believe we are acquainted, sir." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that fell just past his collar, and she noticed the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Xander Reed, madam. And you are right, we have not met, though I was told there would be someone arriving on the evening train. When I saw you standing here alone, I thought perhaps my timing was finally working in my favor." "I think you must have me confused with someone else," Catherine said, though she found herself reluctant to dismiss him entirely. There was something about his directness that was refreshing after months of dealing with her late father's business associates back in Pennsylvania, men who spoke in circles and never said what they truly meant. "I am Catherine Olsen, and I was supposed to be on that train heading east, not arriving from anywhere at all." Xander replaced his hat and took a step closer, close enough that she could see the concern replacing the amusement in his expression. "You missed your train." "By 3 minutes," she confirmed, feeling the frustration rise up again. "I stopped to help an elderly woman who had dropped her packages in the street, and by the time I reached the platform, the train was already pulling out. The station master said there would not be another eastbound until tomorrow afternoon, and then he simply locked the door and left me standing here." "That would be Chester," Xander said with a slight shake of his head. "He keeps railroad hours, which means once his shift ends, he considers his duty done. But you cannot stay out here all night, Miss Olsen. Yankton is generally peaceful, but we are still a frontier town, and a woman alone after dark draws the wrong kind of attention." Catherine lifted her chin, refusing to show the fear that had been building in her chest for the past half hour. "I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself, Mr. Reed. I have pepper spray and a hatpin, and I am not afraid to use either." "I do not doubt your courage," he said gently, and she was surprised by the respect in his tone. Most men would have laughed at her declaration or insisted she needed protection. But courage alone will not keep you warm once the temperature drops another 20 degrees. There is a boarding house 2 streets over, run by Mrs. Patterson. She is respectable and charges fair rates. Let me escort you there, at least. You can consider it my way of apologizing for this town's hospitality. She studied him for a long moment, weighing her limited options. Everything her mother had taught her about propriety said she should refuse, should find her own way without accepting help from a strange man. But everything her father had taught her about survival said that pride was less important than practicality, and standing on an empty train platform arguing about it would not change her circumstances. "Very well," she said finally, "but I insist on paying you for your time, Mr. Reed." "I do not accept charity." Something flickered in his eyes at that, something that might have been approval or might have been pain, but it passed too quickly for her to identify. "I would not dream of taking your money, Miss Olsen. Consider it a favor from one traveler to another. I have been stranded in strange towns before, and I remember what it feels like." He gestured toward the edge of the platform where a beautiful bay horse stood tied to the railing, its coat gleaming even in the fading light. Catherine had not noticed the animal before, but now she could see it was a fine specimen, well cared for and alert. Xander untied the reins and walked the horse closer, moving with an easy grace that spoke of years in the saddle. "This is Copper," he said, running a hand along the horse's neck. "He is gentle as they come if you are worried about riding." "I grew up on a farm," Catherine said, reaching out to let the horse sniff her hand. "My father raised draft horses before he moved us to the city. I know my way around them." "Good," Xander said, and she caught that hint of a smile again. "Then you will not mind riding double for a few blocks. It is faster than walking, and the sooner we get you settled, the sooner you can rest." He swung up into the saddle with practiced ease, then extended his hand to her. Catherine hesitated only a moment before accepting, allowing him to pull her up behind him. She settled her bag across her lap and tried to find a comfortable position, acutely aware of how close she was to this stranger, how she could feel the warmth of his body through the fabric of their clothes. "Hold on," he said over his shoulder, and she reluctantly placed her hands on his waist, feeling the solid muscle beneath her palms. Then they were moving, Copper's gait smooth and steady as they left the train station behind. Yankton spread out before them in the gathering dusk, a town perched on the edge of civilization with the Missouri River as its northern border. Catherine could see the main street lined with businesses, their windows glowing with lamplight. A saloon stood on one corner, music and laughter spilling out into the street. A general store occupied another corner, its windows dark for the night. Everything had a raw, unfinished quality that was nothing like the settled streets of Pittsburgh, where she had spent the last 5 years. Xander guided Copper down a side street lined with smaller buildings, mostly residences with the occasional shop mixed in. He seemed to know exactly where he was going, waving to a few people who called out greetings as they passed. Catherine noticed how people looked at him with respect rather than fear, despite the gun at his hip. Whatever else he might be, Xander Reed was clearly known and trusted in this town. "Here we are," he said, pulling Copper to a stop in front of a 2-story house painted white with green shutters. A sign hanging from the porch proclaimed it to be Patterson's boarding house, and warm light glowed in the windows. "Mrs. Patterson keeps clean rooms and serves breakfast at 7 sharp. She does not tolerate drinking or gambling on the premises, but she is kind to those who need help." He dismounted first, then helped Catherine down, his hands steady on her waist as she found her footing. For a moment they stood close together in the street, and she found herself looking up into his face, trying to read the expression in those dark eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You did not have to help me, but I am grateful that you did." "We take care of each other out here," Xander said, stepping back to give her space. "It is how we survive. Now let me introduce you to Mrs. Patterson, and then I will let you rest." He escorted her up the porch steps and knocked on the door, removing his hat again as it swung open to reveal a plump woman in her 50s with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her eyes lit up when she saw Xander, then shifted to Catherine with curiosity and warmth. "Xander Reed, as I live and breathe," she said, her voice carrying the soft accent of someone raised in the South. "I was wondering when you would come back to town. And who is this lovely young lady you have brought to my door?" "This is Miss Catherine Olsen," Xander said. "She missed her train and needs a room for the night. I told her you run the finest boarding house in Yankton and that she would be safe and comfortable here." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened into immediate sympathy. "Oh, you poor dear. Of course you can stay here. Come in, come in. I have a room on the second floor with a nice view of the street, and I can bring you up some dinner if you have not eaten." "That is very kind of you," Catherine said, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. There was something maternal about Mrs. Patterson that reminded her of her own mother, and for the first time since arriving in Yankton, she felt like things might actually work out. "I will leave you in Mrs. Patterson's capable hands," Xander said, backing toward the door. "Have a safe journey home tomorrow, Miss Olsen." Catherine opened her mouth to thank him again, but he was already gone, the door closing softly behind him. She heard Copper's hooves on the packed earth of the street, the sound fading into the distance, and felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. It was ridiculous, really. She had known the man for less than an hour, had no reason to expect she would ever see him again. "He is a good man," Mrs. Patterson said, as though reading her thoughts. "Been through some hard times, but he never lost his kindness. Now, let me show you to your room and you can tell me what brings you to Yankton while I fix you a plate." The room was simple but clean, with a bed covered in a quilt, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a small desk beneath the window. Catherine set her bag on the bed and allowed herself to sink into the chair, suddenly exhausted from the day's travel and unexpected complications. Mrs. Patterson bustled around, lighting the lamp and checking that the water in the pitcher was fresh. "I will be right back with some food," she said, patting Catherine's shoulder. "You just rest yourself." Alone in the quiet room, Catherine moved to the window and looked out at the street below. She could see a few people moving about their business, a wagon rolling past, a couple walking arm in arm. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear music from the saloon and the occasional burst of laughter. It was all so different from what she was used to, so much wilder and more unpredictable. She had come west following a letter from her mother's cousin, who had promised her a position as a teacher in a small settlement near Denver. After her father's death 6 months ago, Catherine had discovered that his business debts far exceeded his assets, leaving her with nothing but the small inheritance from her grandmother and the determination not to become a burden on her married sisters. Teaching seemed like the perfect solution, a way to support herself while maintaining her independence. But now, standing in this boarding house room in Yankton, South Dakota, Catherine found herself wondering what she was really running toward or away from. The letter from her cousin was tucked safely in her bag, but suddenly the idea of continuing her journey east, back to Pennsylvania, and the life she had known seemed almost appealing. Almost. Mrs. Patterson returned with a tray laden with beef stew, fresh bread, and a slice of apple pie that smelled like heaven. Catherine realized she had not eaten since morning, and her stomach growled in anticipation. Now you eat every bite, Mrs. Patterson instructed, settling into the chair by the desk while Catherine sat on the edge of the bed with the tray. And tell me how you came to be stranded in our little town. Between bites of the delicious stew, Catherine explained about the missed train and her plan to teach in Colorado. Mrs. Patterson listened with interest, asking questions about her family and her journey. It felt good to talk to someone, to have a friendly face after so many days of traveling alone. So Xander just appeared on the platform, Mrs. Patterson asked, a knowing smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That sounds like him. He has a way of showing up exactly when people need help. He mentioned he was expecting someone on the train, Catherine said, curiosity getting the better of her. Do you know who he was supposed to meet? Mrs. Patterson's expression grew thoughtful. I expect he was talking about his sister, Sarah. She went to visit family in Omaha about a month ago, and she was supposed to be coming back this week. But knowing Sarah, she probably got delayed. That girl has never been on time for anything in her life. He seems very kind, Catherine said carefully, not wanting to appear too interested but unable to help herself. He is, Mrs. Patterson agreed, though he has not always had an easy time of it. His parents died when he was just 18, left him and Sarah to fend for themselves. He worked himself near to death for a few years, taking any job he could find, until he finally saved enough to buy a small ranch about 5 miles outside of town. He raises horses now, some of the finest in the territory. Folks come from as far as Nebraska to buy from him. Catherine absorbed this information, building a picture of Xander Reed in her mind. A man who had lost his parents young, who had sacrificed to provide for his sister, who helped strangers without expecting payment. It was a rare combination in her experience, and she found herself hoping she might see him again before she left Yankton. You should get some rest, Mrs. Patterson said, rising from the chair. The morning train to Denver does not leave until 2 in the afternoon, so you will have time for a proper breakfast and to explore the town a bit if you would like. We may be small, but we have some things worth seeing. After Mrs. Patterson left, Catherine washed her face and changed into her nightgown, too tired to do more than braid her dark brown hair before climbing between the clean sheets. She expected to fall asleep immediately, but instead she found herself staring at the ceiling, thinking about dark eyes and a quiet voice asking, "Were you waiting for me?" She finally drifted off near midnight, and her dreams were filled with wide open spaces and the sound of hoofbeats on hard, packed earth. Morning arrived with sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of activity from the street below. Catherine rose and dressed carefully in a green day dress that brought out the color of her hazel eyes, pinning her hair up in a simple but neat style. She felt remarkably refreshed considering the stress of the previous day, and found herself looking forward to exploring Yankton before her train departed. Breakfast in Mrs. Patterson's dining room was a lively affair, with 4 other boarders already seated at the long table when Catherine came down. Mrs. Patterson made introductions. A traveling salesman named Mr. Hughes, an elderly woman named Miss Dorothy who was visiting her daughter, and a young couple named Jim and Mary who were heading to the gold fields in the Black Hills. Everyone was friendly and curious about Catherine, and the conversation flowed easily over eggs, bacon, and biscuits that melted in her mouth. "So you are headed to Denver to teach?" Mary asked, her eyes bright with interest. She looked to be about Catherine's age, with blonde hair and a smattering of freckles across her nose. "That sounds wonderful. I always wanted to be a teacher, but I never had the education for it." "My father believed in education for his daughters," Catherine explained. "He made sure we all could read and write and do mathematics. When he died, Teaching seemed like the natural way to support myself. Well, those children in Colorado are lucky to have you, Miss Dorothy said firmly. Too many young people out here grow up without proper schooling. It is a shame, really. After breakfast, Catherine thanked Mrs. Patterson and paid for her room, then set out to explore the town. She had several hours before her train, and the spring morning was too beautiful to waste sitting indoors. Yankton was busier in daylight, with wagons and riders moving along the main street, people calling out greetings to each other. She passed the general store and decided to go inside, thinking she might purchase some supplies for the next leg of her journey. The store was a treasure trove of goods, from practical items like rope and tools to luxuries like ribbons and hard candy. Catherine was examining a display of leather gloves when she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Miss Olsen, I did not expect to see you still in town." She turned to find Xander Reed standing near the counter, a list in his hand and that same slight smile on his face. He had cleaned up since last night, his dark hair still damp as though he had recently bathed, and he wore a clean shirt beneath his vest. Without the dust of the trail on him, he looked younger, though his eyes still held that quality of having seen more than his years should account for. "Mr. Reed," she said, pleased despite herself. "My train does not leave until this afternoon. I thought I would see a bit of the town before I go. And what do you think of Yankton so far?" he asked, moving closer to examine the gloves she had been looking at. "Does it live up to the wild reputation of the West?" "It is quieter than I expected," Catherine admitted. "Though I suppose it is still early in the day." He laughed at that, a genuine sound that made something warm bloom in her chest. "We save our wildness for Saturday nights, mostly. Today is Tuesday, so everyone is on their best behavior." He paused, seeming to consider something, then continued, "If you have a few hours and would like to see something really worth seeing, I could take you out to my ranch. It is a nice ride, and I promise to have you back in plenty of time for your train." Catherine knew she should refuse. Every rule of propriety said that a young, unmarried woman did not go off alone with a man she had just met, especially not to his home. But looking into Xander's eyes, she found no threat there, only genuine friendliness and perhaps a hint of loneliness that matched her own. "I would like that," she heard herself say, "if you are certain it would not be an imposition." "No imposition at all," he assured her. "In fact, you would be doing me a favor. I need to check on a mare who is due to foal soon, and it would be nice to have company on the ride. Let me just purchase these supplies, and we can head out." 20 minutes later, Catherine found herself on horseback for the first time in years, riding a gentle gray mare named Silver while Xander sat astride Copper beside her. They left Yankton behind, following a well-worn trail that led south through rolling prairie dotted with early wildflowers. The morning sun was warm on her shoulders, and the wind carried the scent of grass and earth and possibility. "You said you grew up on a farm?" Xander asked as they rode side by side at an easy pace. "Where was that?" "Western Pennsylvania," Catherine replied, enjoying the feel of the horse beneath her and the freedom of being out in the open. "My father raised Percherons, big draft horses. When I was young, I spent every spare moment in the stables. My mother despaired of ever making a proper lady of me." "And did she succeed?" Xander asked, a teasing note in his voice. "She convinced me to wear dresses instead of my brother's hand-me-downs, if that counts," Catherine said with a laugh. "But I never quite mastered the art of sitting still and looking decorative. My finishing school teachers found me to be a trial, I am afraid." "I think you turned out just fine," Xander said, and there was something in his tone that made her look over at him. He was watching the trail ahead, but she could see the color rising slightly in his cheeks, as though he had not meant to speak the thought aloud. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Catherine found herself studying the landscape. It was so different from Pennsylvania, so much more open and wild. There were no neat fences dividing property here, no carefully tended fields. Just endless grass and sky, with the occasional stand of trees marking a creek bed or shelter from the wind. "There," Xander said, pointing ahead. "That is my place." Catherine looked and saw a cluster of buildings nestled in a shallow valley. A modest house, painted white with a covered porch, stood at the center. Behind it was a barn, significantly larger than the house, and several corrals where she could see horses moving about. It was not grand by any measure, but there was something solid and welcoming about it, something that spoke of hard work and pride. As they drew closer, Catherine could make out more details. The barn was well maintained with a fresh coat of red paint, and the corrals were built with sturdy rails. A vegetable garden, just beginning to show green shoots, stretched along one side of the house. Everything was neat and organized, the property of someone who took care of what was theirs. A young woman emerged from the house as they rode up, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked to be about 20, with the same dark hair and eyes as Xander, though her features were softer, more delicate. This had to be Sarah, the sister Mrs. Patterson had mentioned. "Xander," she called out, her voice carrying a note of surprise. "I did not expect you back so soon." "And you brought company." They dismounted and Xander made introductions. "Sarah, this is Miss Catherine Olsen. She missed her train yesterday, and I thought she might enjoy seeing the ranch before she continues on to Denver. Catherine, my sister Sarah." "It is lovely to meet you," Sarah said, her eyes bright with curiosity as she shook Catherine's hand. "Any friend of Xander's is welcome here. Would you like to come inside for some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "Actually, I need to check on Daisy first," Xander said. "She was looking restless yesterday, and I want to make sure she is doing all right. Would you like to come along, Catherine? Or you can go inside with Sarah and get out of the sun." "I would love to see the horses," Catherine said immediately, and she saw Xander's face light up with genuine pleasure. The barn was even more impressive inside than out, with clean stalls lining both sides and tack hanging neatly on the walls. The smell of hay and horse was familiar and comforting, bringing back memories of her childhood. Xander led her to a large stall at the back where a beautiful chestnut mare stood, her belly distended with the foal she carried. "This is Daisy," Xander said softly, entering the stall slowly so as not to startle the mare. "She is one of my best breeding mares. This will be her 4th foal, and everyone has been exceptional." Catherine watched as he ran his hands over the mare's sides, checking her with gentle expertise. Daisy nickered softly and leaned into his touch, clearly comfortable with him. There was something beautiful about watching him work, about seeing the care and knowledge in every movement. "She is magnificent," Catherine said, reaching out to stroke the mare's neck. "When is she due?" "Any day now," Xander replied. "I have been checking on her every few hours. First-time mothers can be nervous, but Daisy knows what she is doing. Still, I like to be here just in case." They spent the next hour in the barn, with Xander showing Catherine his other horses and explaining his breeding program. He had a vision for what he wanted to create, horses that combine the strength of draft breeds with the speed and agility of lighter stock. It was fascinating listening to him talk, hearing the passion in his voice, seeing the way his whole demeanor changed when he discussed something he loved. "You could stay, you know," he said suddenly, the words seeming to surprise him as much as they surprised Catherine. They were standing in the barn's doorway, looking out at the corrals where several young horses played. "I mean, if you wanted to teach. Yankton does not have a proper school yet, just Mrs. Henderson, who teaches the younger children in her parlor. The town has been talking about building a real school, hiring a real teacher. You could do that here instead of going all the way to Colorado. Catherine's heart stuttered in her chest. She should have seen this coming, should have recognized the pull she felt toward this place, toward him. But hearing him suggest it out loud made it real, made it something she had to actually consider. "I barely know you," she said quietly, though even as she spoke the words, they felt false. She had known him less than a day, but somehow it felt longer, deeper. Like recognizing someone she had been meant to meet all along. "I know," Xander said, turning to face her fully. The afternoon sun backlit him, making it hard to see his expression, but she could hear the vulnerability in his voice. "And I am probably overstepping by saying anything at all. But I felt something yesterday when I saw you standing on that platform, Catherine. Like maybe I was not there by accident. Like maybe I was supposed to miss Sarah's train so I would be there when you needed help." "Xander," she began, but he held up a hand. "I am not asking you to marry me or make any promises," he said quickly. "I am just saying that if you are looking for a place to teach, to make a life, Yankton could use someone like you, and I would like the chance to know you better if you would let me." Catherine's mind raced. The practical part of her said this was madness, that she should stick to her plan, get on that train and go to Denver where her cousin was expecting her. But another part, a deeper part, whispered that maybe this was exactly what she had been hoping for when she decided to leave Pennsylvania. Not just a job, but a home, not just survival, but something more. "What about my cousin?" she asked. "She is expecting me to teach at her school." "Write to her," Xander suggested. "Explain the situation. If she is a reasonable person, she will understand. And if the school board in Yankton does not hire you, then you can always continue on to Denver later. But at least give this place a chance. Give us a chance." She looked out at the land stretching away in all directions, at the horses running free in the corrals, at the house that somehow already felt familiar despite her never having been inside it. She thought about the kindness Mrs. Patterson had shown her, the friendly faces at breakfast, the way Xander had helped her without hesitation or expectation of reward. "I would need to stay at the boarding house," she said slowly, her heart pounding. "And I would need to meet with the school board to see if they are even interested in hiring me." "Of course," Xander agreed immediately. "I would not expect anything different, but does that mean you will consider it? You will stay and see what Yankton has to offer?" Catherine took a deep breath, feeling like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to jump into unknown water. Every sensible part of her said this was reckless, impulsive, completely unlike her usual careful nature. But standing here in the warm sun, with this man who had appeared exactly when she needed him, it felt right in a way she could not explain. "Yes," she said, the word coming out stronger than she expected. "I will stay, at least for a little while, to see if this could work." The smile that broke across Xander's face was like sunrise, bright and full of promise. He reached out as though to take her hand, then seemed to think better of it, dropping his arm back to his side. "You will not regret it," he said. "I will make sure the school board knows you are interested, and I will speak to Mrs. Patterson about extending your room." "I can speak to Mrs. Patterson myself," Catherine said with a laugh. "I am perfectly capable of arranging my own lodging." "Of course you are," Xander said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I did not mean to imply otherwise. I want to help. I want you to feel welcome here." "I already do," Catherine said softly, and realized it was true. They spent another hour at the ranch, with Sarah joining them for coffee on the porch and asking Catherine 100 questions about Pennsylvania and her journey west. Sarah was warm and funny, with a quick wit that kept Catherine laughing. It was easy to see why Xander was so protective of her, and why he had worked so hard to provide for them both. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Xander insisted on riding back to town with Catherine. They took their time, letting the horses walk at a leisurely pace while they talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Yankton, about the challenges of building a ranch from nothing, about his dreams for the future. She told him about her father's illness and death, about the weight of responsibility that came with being the youngest daughter, about her fear that she would never find her place in the world. "You will find it," Xander said with quiet certainty. "You are too determined not to. And maybe, if we are lucky, your place will be here." Back at the boarding house, Mrs. Patterson was delighted to hear that Catherine would be staying longer. She immediately offered to reduce the weekly rate, claiming that any friend of Xander Reed's deserved special consideration. Catherine accepted gratefully, already calculating how long her small savings would last if she was careful. That evening, after a dinner where Catherine found herself watching the door hoping Xander might appear, she sat at the small desk in her room and wrote 2 letters. One was to her cousin in Denver, apologizing for the change in plans and promising to send word if things did not work out in Yankton. The other was to her eldest sister Margaret, telling her about the missed train and the unexpected opportunity, trying to explain why she had decided to stay without revealing too much about the handsome rancher who had made the decision so easy. The next morning, Catherine dressed in her most professional outfit, a dark blue dress with a high collar and simple buttons, and made her way to the building that served as Yankton's town hall. Xander had told her that the school board met there on Wednesday mornings, and she wanted to present herself as early as possible. 3 men and 2 women made up the board, and they listened with interest as Catherine explained her qualifications and her desire to teach in Yankton. She had brought the letter of recommendation from her father's minister, as well as certificates showing she had completed finishing school and had studied literature and mathematics, beyond what most women received. The board members asked intelligent questions about her teaching philosophy and her experience with children, and by the end of the interview, Catherine felt cautiously optimistic. "We will need to discuss this among ourselves," the chairman, a dignified man named Mr. Thornton, said as they concluded. "But I can tell you that we are impressed with your credentials, Miss Olsen. We have been trying to hire a proper teacher for months, but most of the candidates we interviewed either wanted more money than we could offer or were not serious about committing to a frontier town. If you are truly willing to stay, I think we would be very interested in working with you." "I am serious," Catherine assured him. "Yankton may not have been my original destination, but I believe it could be my home if you will have me." She left the meeting feeling like she was floating, excitement and nervousness warring in her chest. She wanted this to work, wanted it so badly that it scared her a little. She had not realized how much she craved a real home, a place where she belonged, until the possibility of finding one appeared before her. Xander found her an hour later, browsing in the general store again. He looked anxious, his hat in his hands, and Catherine realized he had been waiting for her to finish with the school board. "How did it go?" he asked without preamble. "I think it went well," Catherine said, unable to keep the smile from her face. They said they would make a decision by next week, but Mr. Thornton seemed very positive. The relief on Xander's face was profound. "That is wonderful news. I was hoping, that is, I thought maybe you would like to celebrate. There is a social at the church this evening, just a simple gathering with music and dancing. Would you like to go with me?" Catherine felt her heart rate pick up. This was moving fast, faster than anything in her life had ever moved before. But looking at Xander's hopeful expression, She found she did not want to slow down. She wanted to see where this path led, wanted to explore this feeling that had taken root in her chest the moment he asked if she was waiting for him. "I would love to," she said. The church social turned out to be exactly what Xander had promised. A simple gathering of Yankton's residents in the building that served as both church and community center. Someone had pushed the pews to the sides to create space for dancing, and a small group of musicians was setting up in one corner with a fiddle, a guitar, and a harmonica. Tables along one wall held contributions from various households, pies and cakes and plates of cookies. Catherine had changed into her best dress, a deep rose color that her sister had insisted she pack, and she had taken extra care with her hair, leaving a few tendrils loose to frame her face. When Xander came to collect her at the boarding house, the look in his eyes told her the effort had been worth it. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. The social was already in full swing when they arrived, with what looked like half the town crowded into the space. Catherine recognized some faces from her day in town, and she was pleased when people greeted her warmly, treating her like she already belonged. Mrs. Patterson was there with a group of other women her age, and she gave Catherine an encouraging wave. Sarah was talking animatedly with a young man near the refreshment table, and she brightened when she saw her brother and Catherine arrive. The music started, a lively reel that had people pairing up for dancing. Xander led Catherine onto the floor, and she discovered that he was an excellent dancer, moving with the same natural grace she had noticed when he rode Copper. They spun and stepped in time with the music, laughing when they nearly collided with another couple, and Catherine felt something loosen in her chest, some tight knot of worry and fear she had been carrying since her father died. Between dances, Xander introduced her to what felt like everyone in Yankton. She met the doctor, a kind-faced man named Thomas Wright, who welcomed her warmly. She met the owner of the general store and his wife, who immediately began telling her about their 3 children who would need a teacher. She met ranchers and farmers, craftsmen and merchants, and every single person made her feel welcome, made her feel like her decision to stay was the right one. "You are going to fit right in here," Xander murmured in her ear as they took a break from dancing to sample some of the desserts. "I can already see it. People like you." "They seem very kind," Catherine agreed, biting into a slice of apple pie that rivaled anything her mother had ever made. "Though I suspect part of their enthusiasm is because they desperately need a teacher." "That is part of it," Xander admitted. "But it is more than that. You have something, Catherine. A warmth, a genuineness that people respond to. I saw it in you the moment we met, and everyone else is seeing it now too." She felt herself blush at the compliment, unused to such direct praise. "You give me too much credit." "I am just being myself." "Exactly," Xander said, his voice soft. "And yourself is extraordinary." Before Catherine could respond, the musician struck up a waltz and Xander set down his plate and offered his hand. "Dance with me again." She placed her hand in his without hesitation, and they moved back onto the floor. The waltz was slower, more intimate than the reels and jigs they had been dancing, requiring them to stand closer together. Xander's hand was warm on her waist, and she could feel the strength in him, the solid presence that made her feel safe and cherished. "I am glad you missed your train," he said quietly as they turned in time with the music. "So am I," Catherine replied, and meant it with her whole heart. The social went late into the evening, and by the time Xander walked Catherine back to the boarding house, the stars were thick overhead and the spring air had taken on a chill. They walked slowly, neither of them eager to end the evening, their footsteps echoing on the wooden sidewalks. "Thank you for tonight," Catherine said when they reached Mrs. Patterson's front porch. I cannot remember the last time I enjoyed myself so much. We should do it again, Xander said. There is a theater company coming through next month performing Shakespeare. Would you like to go? Next month, Catherine repeated, feeling something flutter in her chest. He was already thinking ahead, already imagining a future where they continued spending time together. Unless you would rather not, Xander said quickly. I do not want to presume. No, Catherine said, reaching out to touch his arm. I would love to go. I am not used to planning so far ahead. Since my father died, I have been taking things one day at a time. I understand, Xander said gently. And we can keep taking things one day at a time if that is what you need. But I want you to know that I am hoping for many more days, Catherine. I have never met anyone like you, and I want to see where this leads. She looked up at him, at his earnest face in the moonlight, and felt something shift inside her, some final wall crumbling. I want that too, she whispered. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. He leaned slightly closer, his eyes asking a question and her breath caught in her throat. But then he seemed to think better of it, pulling back with obvious reluctance. I should let you get some rest, he said, his voice slightly rough. But I will see you tomorrow. I need to go to the mill in the morning, but I could stop by in the afternoon if you would like to take a walk. I would like that very much, Catherine said. She watched him walk away into the night, his tall figure disappearing into the shadows, and then she went inside feeling like she was in a dream. Mrs. Patterson was waiting in the parlor with a knowing smile. I take it you had a nice time? The older woman asked. The nicest, Catherine confirmed. Mrs. Patterson, am I being foolish, staying here for a man I just met? That depends, Mrs. Patterson said thoughtfully. Are you staying just for him, or are you staying for yourself too? Catherine considered the question. She thought about the school board meeting, about the warm welcome she had received at the social, about the way Yankton felt like it could be a home rather than just a stop on her journey. For myself too, she said finally. I want to teach here. I want to be part of this community. Xander is part of that, but he is not all of it. Then you are not being foolish at all, Mrs. Patterson said with satisfaction. You are being brave, and I have a feeling that Yankton is going to be very glad you missed that train. The next few days fell into a pleasant pattern. Xander came by each afternoon, and they would walk through town or ride out into the prairie, talking for hours about everything under the sun. Catherine learned about his childhood, about the day his parents were killed in a wagon accident, about the weight of responsibility he had carried for Sarah. He learned about her 3 sisters, about her father's stubborn pride that had prevented him from asking for help when his business started failing, about her fear of becoming invisible in a world that seemed to have no place for unmarried women without family money. On Friday, the school board sent word that they wanted to meet with Catherine again. She dressed carefully and made her way to the town hall, her heart pounding with hope and nervousness. This time, the meeting was shorter, and Mr. Thornton got straight to the point. Miss Olsen, the board has voted unanimously to offer you the position of schoolteacher for Yankton and the surrounding area. We can offer you $40 a month, and we will provide a small cottage near the church where you can live. School would start in September after the harvest and run through May. Would you be interested in accepting? Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. $40 a month was more than she had expected, and having her own cottage meant independence, dignity. Yes, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Yes, I would be honored to accept. The board members all smiled, and Mrs. Whitman, one of the female members, came around the table to shake Catherine's hand. We are so glad to have you, dear. This is exactly what Yankton needs. Our children deserve a proper education, and I can tell you are the right person to give it to them. Catherine left the meeting feeling like she could float. She had a job, a home, a purpose. Everything she had been searching for had fallen into place in less than a week, in a town she had never planned to visit. It felt like fate, like the universe had conspired to put her exactly where she needed to be. She went straight to Xander's ranch, borrowing silver from the livery and riding out alone, too excited to wait for him to come to town. She found him in the barn, working on repairing a broken stall door, and the look on his face when she told him the news was everything she could have hoped for. "That is incredible," he said, dropping his tools and pulling her into a hug without thinking. She stiffened for just a moment, surprised by the contact, then relaxed into his embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him, the racing of his heart beneath her cheek. "I knew they would hire you." "How could they not? I start in September," she said, pulling back just enough to look up at him. "I have my own cottage and everything. I can hardly believe it." "Believe it," Xander said, his hands still resting lightly on her arms. "You earned this, Catherine. You and your qualifications and your determination." Sarah came running from the house when she heard the commotion, and she squealed with delight at the news. "This is wonderful. Now you have to stay, and we can be proper friends instead of you being someone who is just passing through." They celebrated with coffee and the cookies Sarah had made that morning, sitting on the porch and watching the horses in the corrals. Catherine felt a contentment settle over her that she had not experienced in years, maybe ever. This was what home was supposed to feel like, she realized. Not just a place, but the people who welcomed you, who celebrated your successes and supported you through your failures. As spring turned to summer, Catherine and Xander grew closer. He showed her every inch of his ranch, teaching her about horse breeding and training. She shared her plans for the school, asking his advice on what subjects would be most useful for children growing up in the territory. They rode out into the prairie to watch the sunset, sat by the creek reading poetry aloud, attended every social event Yankton had to offer. People began to talk, of course. A town the size of Yankton did not miss the fact that the new schoolteacher was spending most of her free time with Xander Reed. But the talk was generally approving, with most folks agreeing that they made a fine couple. Mrs. Patterson was particularly pleased, claiming she had known from the first night that something special was developing. In July, Daisy finally gave birth to her foal, a beautiful colt with the same chestnut coloring as his mother and the promise of his father's speed. Xander was beside himself with joy, and he insisted Catherine be there for the birth, waking her in the middle of the night to ride out to the ranch. She sat on a hay bale in the barn, watching in wonder as new life entered the world, and when Xander looked at her with tears in his eyes, she felt her own heart expand with something she was finally ready to name. She loved him. She was in love with Xander Reed, this man who had appeared when she needed help and had stayed to show her what her life could be. The realization should have scared her, but instead it felt right, inevitable, like coming home after a long journey. "I want to name him Sterling," Xander said, watching the colt struggle to his feet on wobbly legs. "It means excellent, valuable. I think he is going to be something special." "He already is," Catherine said softly, "just like his owner." Xander looked over at her, and something in her expression must have given her away because his eyes widened. "Catherine," he began, but she shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "I am not ready to say the words yet, but soon. I promise soon." He nodded, understanding in his eyes, and they sat together in comfortable silence as the sun began to rise, painting the barn in shades of gold and pink. August brought heat and long days that seemed to stretch on forever. Catherine spent most of her time preparing for the school year, meeting with parents and working on the cottage that would be her new home. The building was small but well made, with 2 rooms and a tiny kitchen. She used some of her savings to purchase basic furniture and supplies, and Xander helped her move everything in, enlisting Sarah and several other friends to make the work lighter. The day she officially moved out of Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, the older woman hugged her tightly and told her to come by for coffee anytime she needed company or advice. "You have become like a daughter to me," Mrs. Patterson said, wiping at her eyes. "I am so proud of what you have built here." Catherine's first official day as a teacher arrived in the first week of September. She had 23 students ranging in age from 6 to 15, and they came from farms and ranches scattered across miles of prairie. Some rode to school on horses, others came in wagons with their siblings. Catherine was nervous that first morning, worried that they would not take her seriously, or that she would not be able to handle such a wide range of ages and abilities. But from the moment she rang the bell and called the children to order, she felt at home. Teaching was what she was meant to do, she realized. Watching young minds light up with understanding, helping them discover the magic of books and numbers and ideas, it filled something in her she had not known was empty. Xander came by the school every few days, ostensibly to check on the building or drop off supplies, but really just to see her. The children quickly figured out that something special was happening between their teacher and the horse rancher, and they teased both of them mercilessly, asking when there would be a wedding. "That is not appropriate talk for the classroom," Catherine would say sternly, but she could never quite hide her smile. The truth was, she wondered the same thing. She and Xander had been courting for 5 months now, and while neither of them had spoken explicitly about marriage, it hung in the air between them, a question waiting to be asked. The answer came on a crisp October evening. Xander had invited Catherine to dinner at the ranch, claiming that Sarah had perfected a new recipe she wanted to share. But when Catherine arrived, she found the house empty except for Xander, with candles lit on the table and the smell of roast chicken filling the air. "Where is Sarah?" Catherine asked, confused. "Staying with the Whitmans in town," Xander said, taking her coat. "I wanted to have you to myself tonight. I hope you do not mind." They ate dinner by candlelight, talking and laughing as they always did, but Catherine could sense something different in Xander's demeanor. He seemed nervous, his usual confidence replaced with an edginess that made her own nerves flutter. After they finished eating, Xander led her outside to the porch. The sun had set, leaving the sky painted in purples and deep blues, and the first stars were beginning to appear. It was beautiful and peaceful, the kind of evening that made Catherine grateful for every choice that had led her to this place. "I have been thinking," Xander began, taking her hands in his, "about that day at the train station when I first saw you standing there alone. I asked if you were waiting for me and you said we did not know each other. But Catherine, I feel like I have known you my whole life, like some part of me was waiting for you to appear." Catherine's heart began to pound. "Xander," she whispered. "Let me finish," he said gently. "These past 6 months have been the happiest of my life. You have brought light and joy and purpose to my days. You have become Sarah's best friend. You have made this whole community better just by being part of it. But more than that, you have made me better. You have shown me what it means to truly love someone, to want their happiness more than your own." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, and then he was kneeling before her on the weathered boards of the porch, holding out a simple gold ring with a small diamond that caught the starlight. "Catherine Olsen, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice when you decided to stay in Yankton? Will you build a life with me, here on this ranch, and help me create the family I have always dreamed of?" Tears were streaming down Catherine's face, but she was smiling, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, Xander, I will marry you. I love you so much." He surged to his feet and kissed her then. Properly kissed her for the first time, and it was everything she had imagined and more. His lips were warm and sure against hers, and she wound her arms around his neck, pressing closer, wanting to be as near to him as possible. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, he slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into another embrace. "I love you too," he murmured against her hair. "I have loved you since that first night, when you stood on the platform with your chin up and your pepper spray ready, determined to handle whatever came your way. You are the strongest, bravest, most incredible woman I have ever met, and I cannot believe you agreed to marry me." "I am the lucky one," Catherine insisted. "You saved me, Xander. Not just that night at the station, but in every way that matters. You showed me what home feels like." They stood together on the porch for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans and dreaming about the future. They decided to marry in December, giving Catherine time to finish the fall term of school and for Xander to prepare the ranch house for a wife. They would have a simple ceremony at the church with the whole town invited, followed by a celebration at the community hall. When Xander finally took Catherine home that night, they found half of Yankton waiting at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house, having somehow gotten word of the engagement. Sarah was there, beaming with pride, and Mrs. Patterson was crying happy tears. The doctor and his wife were there, the Whitman family, the owner of the general store. It seemed like everyone Catherine had come to care about had gathered to celebrate. "How did you all know?" Catherine asked, laughing as she was pulled into hug after hug. "Small town, Mrs. Whitman said with a wink. "We know everything, and we have been waiting for Xander to finally propose since about 2 weeks after you arrived." The next few months passed in a blur of preparation and excitement. Catherine taught during the day and spent her evenings working on her wedding dress with help from Sarah and several other women from town. Xander worked on expanding the ranch house, adding a proper bedroom and a larger kitchen, determined to make it comfortable for his new bride. They were building their life together piece by piece, and every day Catherine felt more certain that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Her sisters wrote back with congratulations and surprise. Margaret, always the practical one, expressed concern about Catherine marrying someone she had known for such a short time. But Elizabeth and Jane, the romantics of the family, were thrilled, declaring it the most exciting thing that had ever happened to any of them. Catherine wrote long letters describing Xander and Yankton and the school, trying to help them understand why she had fallen so completely in love with this place and this man. December arrived with snow and bitter cold, but the weather did nothing to dampen the excitement surrounding the wedding. The entire town threw themselves into preparations, with everyone wanting to contribute something to the celebration. Mrs. Patterson organized the food, declaring that Catherine was as good as a daughter and deserved the finest wedding feast Yankton could provide. The men built additional tables and benches for the community hall. The children in Catherine's class made decorations and practiced a song to perform at the ceremony. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, the sun glinting off fresh snow. Catherine woke early in her cottage, nerves and excitement making sleep impossible. Sarah arrived with Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Whitman to help her dress, the 3 women fussing over every detail. The wedding dress was simple but beautiful, made of ivory silk with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Catherine's dark hair was pinned up in an elegant style, with a few curls left loose to frame her face. "You are absolutely beautiful," Sarah said, wiping away tears. "My brother is the luckiest man alive." "I am the lucky one," Catherine insisted, but she could not stop smiling at her reflection. She had never imagined herself as a bride, had started to believe she might spend her life alone. But here she was, about to marry a man she loved with her whole heart, surrounded by friends who had become family. The church was packed when they arrived, every pew filled with people eager to witness the union. Catherine stood at the back, her arm linked with Dr. Wright's. She had asked him to give her away since her father was gone, and the kind doctor had agreed with tears in his eyes, saying it would be his honor. Then the music began, and Catherine's eyes found Xander at the front of the church. He looked devastatingly handsome in a new suit, his dark hair combed back, his face shining with love and joy as he watched her walk toward him. Sarah stood beside him as his best woman, beaming with happiness. The ceremony itself was a blur. Catherine was aware of speaking her vows, of Xander's voice low and sure as he promised to love and cherish her, of the weight of the ring as he slipped it onto her finger. But mostly, she was aware of his eyes on her, full of so much emotion that it took her breath away. "You may kiss your bride," the minister finally said, and Xander did, pulling her close and kissing her thoroughly while the congregation erupted in cheers and applause. They walked back down the aisle together as husband and wife, and Catherine felt like she was floating. Everything had led to this moment, every choice and chance encounter and missed train. She had found her home, her purpose, her love, all in one unexpected place. The celebration at the community hall lasted well into the night. There was food and music and dancing, with everyone in Yankton turning out to congratulate the newlyweds. Catherine danced with Xander, with Dr. Wright, with her students, with what felt like every man in town. Her feet ached and her face hurt from smiling, but she had never been happier. As the evening was winding down, Xander pulled her aside to a quiet corner. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Reed?" he asked, his voice full of promise. "More than ready," Catherine replied, and they slipped out into the cold December night, making their way to the ranch that was now officially theirs together. The ranch house was warm and welcoming, with a fire already burning in the hearth. Xander had sent Sarah to stay with Mrs. Patterson for a few days, giving them privacy to begin their married life. He carried Catherine over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the middle of the parlor. "I still cannot believe this is real," Catherine said, looking around at the home they would share. "6 months ago, I was standing on a train platform with no idea what came next, and now I am here, married to you with a whole life ahead of us." "It is real," Xander assured her, pulling her close. "And it is just the beginning, Catherine. We have so much ahead of us. Building this ranch together, watching your students grow, starting a family of our own someday. All of it together." "Together," Catherine echoed and kissed him again, pouring all her love and gratitude and joy into it. That night, in the privacy of their bedroom, they came together as husband and wife, and Catherine discovered a whole new dimension to the love she felt for Xander. His touch was reverent and gentle, his kisses worshipful, and when they finally lay tangled together in the aftermath, she felt complete in a way she never had before. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Xander replied, his arms tightening around her. "Thank you for missing that train," Catherine laughed softly. "Thank you for being at the station when I needed you." Their first year of marriage was full of joy and challenges and growth. Catherine continued teaching through the spring, watching her students flourish under her guidance. Several of the older ones expressed interest in continuing their education beyond what Yankton could offer, and Catherine spent hours helping them prepare applications to schools back east. Xander's ranch continued to thrive, with Sterling growing into a magnificent young horse that drew buyers from across the territory. In the summer, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. The news filled both of them with excitement and a little fear. She was healthy and strong, but childbirth was dangerous even under the best circumstances, and they were far from major medical facilities. Dr. Wright assured them he had delivered hundreds of babies, and that Catherine had nothing to worry about, but Xander still fretted, becoming even more protective than usual. "I am not made of glass," Catherine reminded him one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from riding Silver out to check on one of the students. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time. I will be fine." "I know," Xander said, but the worry did not leave his eyes. I cannot lose you, Catherine. You are everything to me." "You will not lose me," she promised, taking his face in her hands. "I am not going anywhere. We are going to have this baby, and we are going to raise them together, and we are going to grow old on this ranch watching our grandchildren play. That is the future I see, and I have never been wrong about the important things." In March of 1878, Catherine went into labor on a snowy afternoon. Xander rode through the storm to fetch Dr. Wright and Mrs. Patterson, then paced the parlor while the women attended to his wife. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning, and Xander aged years listening to Catherine's cries of pain. But finally, just as the sun was rising, a baby's cry filled the house. Dr. Wright emerged from the bedroom with a tired smile. "You have a son," he said, "and your wife is exhausted but healthy. You can go in now." Xander burst into the bedroom to find Catherine propped up against the pillows, her face pale and damp with sweat, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up as he entered, and the smile that lit her face was radiant despite her obvious exhaustion. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Xander approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was making little snuffling sounds, his eyes squeezed shut. Xander felt his throat close with emotion, overwhelmed by the perfection of this small person they had created. "He is beautiful," Xander whispered. "You are incredible. I cannot believe you just did that." "We did it together," Catherine corrected, though her smile was amused. "Do you want to hold him?" Xander took his son with shaking hands, cradling the baby against his chest. The infant was so small, so fragile, and Xander felt the weight of responsibility settle over him. He would protect this child with everything he had, would make sure he grew up knowing he was loved and valued. "What should we name him?" Catherine asked. They had discussed names for months without deciding on anything definite. But looking down at his son, Xander suddenly knew. "Thomas," he said. "Thomas Xavier Reed, after Dr. Wright, who helped bring him into the world, and so he will have part of both our names." "Thomas," Catherine repeated, testing it out. "I like it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to your family." Word of the baby's birth spread quickly through Yankton, and over the next few days, a steady stream of visitors came to the ranch bearing gifts and congratulations. Sarah was beside herself with joy at being an aunt, declaring Thomas the most perfect baby ever born. Mrs. Patterson brought enough food to feed them for a week. Catherine's students made cards and drawings to welcome their teacher's son. As Catherine recovered, and they settled into life as a family of three, Xander found himself marveling again at the twist of fate that had brought them together. If Catherine had caught that train, if he had not been at the station that evening, if she had decided to continue on to Denver instead of staying in Yankton, none of this would exist. Their love, their marriage, their son, it all hinged on that one moment when he had asked if she was waiting for him. "What are you thinking about?" Catherine asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch together, watching the sunset while Thomas slept in her arms. It was late spring, and the prairie was alive with wildflowers and new grass. That day at the station, Xander admitted, how everything in our lives changed because you missed your train. I have thought about that too, Catherine said. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had made it to Denver. Would I have been happy there? Would I have found what I was looking for? Do you regret staying? Xander asked, sudden fear clutching his heart. Not for a single second, Catherine said firmly, reaching over to take his hand. I found everything I was looking for right here. You, this ranch, my school, Thomas, all of it. Missing that train was the best thing that ever happened to me. Me too, Xander said, bringing her hand to his lips. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Catherine Reed. Life continued in its rhythm of seasons and growth. Thomas grew into an energetic toddler who loved the horses almost as much as his father did. Catherine returned to teaching part-time once the baby was old enough, bringing Thomas with her to school and letting the older students help watch him. The school flourished, with the town eventually building a larger building to accommodate the growing number of students. Xander's ranch expanded as his reputation for breeding excellent horses spread. He hired additional help, young men from town who wanted to learn the trade, and he built new barns and corrals. Sterling became the foundation of a bloodline that would be sought after for generations. 2 years after Thomas was born, Catherine gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, after Catherine's mother. Rose had Catherine's hazel eyes and a temperament that was equal parts sweet and stubborn. Then came another son, William, followed 3 years later by twin girls, Emma and Alice. The ranch house grew along with the family, with Xander adding rooms and expanding the porch until it wrapped around the entire building. Sarah eventually married a rancher named Daniel who had a spread adjoining Xander's land. They built their own home and started their own family, giving Thomas and his siblings a whole pack of cousins to play with. The two families were constantly in and out of each other's houses, sharing meals and chores and celebrations. Catherine's school became one of the best in the territory, with former students going on to universities and returning to contribute to their community. Several of her first students became teachers themselves, spreading throughout Dakota territory and bringing the same dedication to education that Catherine had shown them. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Xander planned a surprise for Catherine. He had invited everyone they knew to gather at the ranch for a celebration, but he had not told Catherine the scale of what he had planned. When she rode home from school that December afternoon, she found the ranch yard filled with wagons and horses, and what looked like the entire population of Yankton waiting to surprise her. "What is all this?" she asked, laughing as Xander helped her down from Silver. "This is me showing you how much you are loved," Xander said, wrapping his arm around her waist. "How much you have changed this town in the 10 years since you decided to stay. Look at all these people, Catherine. Look at what you have built." She looked at the faces surrounding her. Her students past and present, their parents, the town council, Dr. Wright, now semi-retired but still practicing, Mrs. Patterson, slower now but still sharp as ever, all the people who had welcomed her when she was a stranger and had become her family. "I did not build this alone," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "We built it together, all of us." The celebration lasted long into the night with food and music and stories about Catherine's impact on Yankton. Speaker after speaker stood up to share memories, to express gratitude for what she had taught their children or how she had helped their family. By the end of it, Catherine was crying openly, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the children were asleep, Catherine and Xander sat together on their porch, wrapped in blankets against the December cold. "Have I told you lately that I love you?" Catherine asked, leaning her head against Xander's shoulder. "Not in the last 5 minutes," Xander replied with a smile, "but I never get tired of hearing it." "I love you," Catherine said. "I love the life we have built, the family we have created, the home we have made. When I stood on that train platform 10 years ago, scared and alone, I never imagined I would end up here. But this is everything I never knew I wanted." "Were you waiting for me?" Xander asked, echoing the question that had started everything. "Yes," Catherine said simply. "I just did not know it yet. But yes, I was waiting for you. I was waiting for this life, this love, this home. I was waiting for all of it, and you helped me find it." "We found it together," Xander corrected gently, "and we will keep building it together for the rest of our lives." The years continued to pass, marked by the growth of their children and the deepening of their love. Thomas grew into a young man who shared his father's gift with horses, eventually taking over the day-to-day running of the ranch. Rose discovered a love of books and learning that rivaled her mother's, and she became Catherine's assistant teacher before leaving to attend a women's college back east. William became a veterinarian, combining his love of animals with a sharp scientific mind. The twins, Emma and Alice, were inseparable and eventually opened a dress shop in Yankton that became famous throughout the territory for the quality of their work. Catherine taught for 25 years before finally retiring at 50. She spent her retirement years writing a comprehensive history of Yankton and establishing a library that bore her name. Xander continued working with horses until his mid-60s, when he finally allowed Thomas to take over completely. They spent their later years traveling to visit their children and growing collection of grandchildren, always returning to the ranch house that held so many memories. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the town of Yankton held a celebration in their honor. The whole community turned out, including several of Catherine's first students who were now middle-aged themselves with children and grandchildren. The mayor gave a speech about how Xander and Catherine Reed had shaped the character of Yankton, how their dedication to family and community and education had made the town what it was. When Catherine missed her train in 1876, the mayor said, Yankton gained its heart. And when Xander had the wisdom to ask her to stay, he gave us all a gift. They have shown us what love looks like, what commitment means, what building a life together truly entails. We are all better for having them among us. That night back at the ranch, Catherine and Xander sat on their porch as they had done countless times over the decades. They were older now, their hair gray and their movements slower, but the love between them burned as bright as ever. 40 years, Catherine marveled. Where did the time go? Into 5 amazing children and 11 grandchildren and counting, Xander replied with a smile. Into building this ranch and your school, into loving each other every single day. Do you ever wonder how different our lives would have been if I had caught that train? Catherine asked. It was a question they returned to occasionally, contemplating the sliding door moments that had shaped their destiny. Sometimes, Xander admitted, but I always come to the same conclusion. We were meant to find each other, Catherine. Whether it was that night at the station or some other time, some other place, I believe we would have found our way together. Some loves are inevitable. That is very romantic, Catherine said with a laugh. When did you become such a poet? I learned from the best, Xander replied, pulling her closer. You have been teaching me about love and beauty and meaning for 40 years. I am bound to have picked up something. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of the prairie at night, the same sounds that had accompanied their love story from the beginning. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Closer by, they could hear the horses moving in the corrals, the gentle sounds of life continuing as it always had. "Thank you," Catherine said suddenly. "For what?" Xander asked. "For asking if I was waiting for you," Catherine replied. "For giving me a reason to stay. For loving me so completely that I never once regretted my choice to build a life here." "You never have to thank me for that," Xander said gently. "Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done. The privilege of my life has been getting to be your husband, to watch you become the woman you were always meant to be, to build this family and this home with you. We did build something special, did we not?" Catherine said, looking out at the ranch that had grown far beyond anything they had imagined that first day she visited. "We did," Xander agreed. "And it all started with a missed train and a cowboy who could not believe his luck when he saw a beautiful woman standing alone on a platform." Catherine laughed, the sound as bright and joyful as it had been 40 years earlier. "Best missed train of my life." They lived many more happy years, watching their grandchildren grow and eventually welcoming great-grandchildren into the world. Catherine's library became a cornerstone of Yankton's cultural life, hosting reading groups and lectures. The school she had founded evolved into a proper academy, drawing students from across the state. Xander's horses continued to be prized throughout the West, with the Reed name becoming synonymous with quality and integrity. When Xander passed away at the age of 83, peacefully in his sleep with Catherine beside him, the whole town mourned. The church could not hold everyone who came to pay their respects, and the service had to be held outdoors despite the cold January weather. Catherine stood surrounded by their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, drawing strength from the family they had created, the legacy they had built together. She lived 3 more years, spending her days surrounded by family, tending the garden she had planted that first spring, and sitting on the porch watching the sunset. She never felt alone, even though she missed Xander with an ache that never quite faded. His presence was everywhere, in every corner of the house they had built together, in every face of their descendants, in every horse that ran in the corrals. On what would have been their 43rd wedding anniversary, Catherine sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, looking out at the winter landscape. Rose was inside making dinner, and several grandchildren were playing in the snow nearby, their laughter carrying on the cold air. Catherine felt tired, more tired than usual but also peaceful. She had lived a full life, a good life, exactly the kind of life she had dreamed of during those uncertain days after her father's death. She closed her eyes, listening to the sounds of her family, and felt a familiar presence beside her. She could almost hear Xander's voice asking one more time, "Were you waiting for me?" "Yes," she whispered into the winter twilight. "I was waiting for you. And I would wait 1,000 lifetimes to find you again." Catherine passed away that evening, slipping quietly into sleep surrounded by the people she loved. When they found her in the morning, she had a peaceful smile on her face, and Rose swore she looked younger, as though the years had fallen away in those final moments. The town of Yankton mourned again, but this time the grief was mixed with celebration. Catherine Reed had lived 86 years, had touched countless lives, had built something that would endure long after she was gone. At her funeral, her former students spoke about the teacher who had believed in them. Her children spoke about the mother who had shown them what unconditional love looked like. Her grandchildren spoke about the grandmother, whose stories had shaped their understanding of courage and determination. And through it all ran the thread of her love story with Xander, the tale of the woman who missed her train and the cowboy who asked if she was waiting for him. It became part of Yankton's mythology, a story told to newcomers to illustrate the town's character, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected detours. Catherine and Xander were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, with matching headstones that bore simple inscriptions. His Reed, beloved husband, father, and friend. He asked the right question. Hers Reed, beloved wife, mother, and teacher. She found her home. But the real testament to their love was not carved in stone. It lived on in their descendants who continued to run the ranch, who taught in the school system Catherine had helped build, who lived by the values of community and dedication and love that Xander and Catherine had embodied. It lived on in the countless students Catherine had taught, who passed her lessons down to their own children and grandchildren. It lived on in every person who heard their story and believed that fate and chance and choice could combine to create something beautiful and lasting. Years later, when the town of Yankton erected a statue in the square honoring its founders and most influential citizens, they included a bronze sculpture of a woman standing on a train platform, looking up at a tall cowboy who had just asked her a question. A plaque at the base read, "Catherine and Xander Reed." Their love built this community. And every time someone new arrived in Yankton, confused or lost or looking for direction, someone would tell them the story of the schoolteacher who missed her train and the rancher who helped her find her way. They would tell them how a single moment of chance had changed two lives and shaped an entire community. They would tell them that sometimes you find exactly what you need in the last place you expected to look. Because that was the truth that Catherine and Xander had proven with their lives. That love can appear when you least expect it, in the form of a stranger on a train platform asking a simple question. That home is not always where you plan to be, but where you choose to stay. And that the best stories do not end with a single moment, but continue growing and deepening through decades of choosing each other, day after day, year after year, until two separate lives become one beautiful legacy. The ranch still stands today, though it has changed hands several times since Thomas Reed's children sold it decades ago. The current owners maintain the original house as a museum, preserving the room where Catherine taught Thomas to read, the porch where she and Xander spent countless evenings watching the sunset, the barn where Sterling and Daisy and all the other horses lived. Visitors come from across the country to see where the legendary love story unfolded. To stand where Catherine stood that first day, Xander brought her to his home, to feel the echoes of a love that transcended time. And sometimes, on spring evenings when the wind carries the scent of wildflowers and new grass, if you stand very still on that old porch, you can almost hear the faint sound of laughter, the murmur of quiet conversation, the whisper of a question that changed everything. Were you waiting for me? The answer, carried on the prairie wind, is always the same. Yes, I was waiting for you.